What's up everybody, it's me Zombie, and today I'm going to be showing you how I made my bow for my Aloy cosplay from Horizon Zero Dawn. I made this in about 2.5 days in between work and other adulty responsibilities, so it was super rushed, but given the time constraints, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I hope that showing you how I made mine helps you make something cool of your own. I drew out a rough pattern onto some scrap paper and then transferred it onto 1/2 inch thick EVA foam mats. I traced this half pattern 4 times. This bow's actually pretty big, it's about 130 centimeters long, so that means I had to use 4 foam sheets. After tracing and cutting everything out, I contact cemented everything together so it would fit tightly. For that weak point in the middle, I used a dowel, which in my case is just a paint stick. I super glued it right onto the foam, which doesn't really matter because it's going to be covered by detail eventually anyway. After everything was stuck together, I used my rotary tool and sanded down all of the edges just so it would be a little bit more rounded and easier to work with for the next step. While looking at my reference pictures, I cut out a bunch of really small pieces of foam. I used 2mm foam, 7mm foam, and even 1/2 inch thick EVA foam mats. And I cut out 4 of every detail because the bow's nearly symmetrical on all 4 sides. I used a utility knife to cut out the larger foam pieces, and an X-Acto blade and even some scissors to cut out the smaller pieces. And since these pieces are smaller, I found that super glue was a bit easier for me to work with. After my foam pieces were added, I went back to my workshop and dremeled down some of those hard edges to make them a little bit more softer and more accurate. I'm also going over some of my seams with the rotary tool to make them less noticeable. Next up, I tried a process that I'd never really tried before. I decided to cover the entire thing with black worbla to make it sturdy and to really round out a lot of those details. I found that I did lose some detail and had to spend some extra time really pressing that worbla into all those little bits that I needed it to go in. I'm not gonna lie, this was my first time working with worbla and it was super frustrating. It took a lot of practice to make it do what I wanted it to do, and I'm hoping to improve in the future, but this was definitely a learning curve for me. I added the worbla to the bow by cutting out pieces of worbla and using my heat gun to make it form to my foam pieces. While it's still warm, I used my sculpting tool to really press in all of those details. After the worbla cooled down, it made my prop really durable. It didn't flex or bend at all like it was when it was foam, and it was more sturdy looking, just like a bow should look. After it was all covered in worbla, I hit it with a coat of filler primer. This really helps smooth out the bumpy surface that worbla tends to have and makes it ready for me to start sanding in some of the details that I needed. After my filler primer was dry, I sanded and dremeled in some more details that I needed. I hit it with one more coat of filler primer before starting my paint job. Here I'm just using some acrylics and just looking at my reference pictures and going to town. I used a variety of different brushes, from wide brushes to teeny tiny little brushes. I diluted my paint with water as needed, and luckily acrylics are really easy to work with and blend. There are some feathers on either side of the bow, and I just used some 5mm craft foam and cut in my details with an X-Acto blade. I hit the foam with my heat gun and it really opened up all the detail, and they look just like feathers. To make it look like some of the paint has chipped away and some metal is exposed underneath, I used a brush and some silver spray paint to paint over some details that I thought would be exposed from being chipped away after years of use. To make those details really pop, I used some black acrylic paint with a small paintbrush and painted over those details just to make them more visible against the white. After the paint job and adding all of my paracord, leather, and suede details, this thing is all done. This prop is very detail-oriented, just the more you look at it, the more you see, and it was kind of overwhelming, but also a big learning experience for me. I know it's not the best thing ever due to the time constraint, but I'm pretty happy with what I was able to do with the short amount of time that I had, and it made my costume look really cool when it was all together. This thing was really durable, it got bumped bumped a lot of times, and I think that's thanks to the worbla, so I can't wait to work with more of this stuff and other materials in the future. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss the next video. If you have any questions, just leave one right down below and I will be happy to get back to you. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Bye!